Hey guys, this is Gian Perez doing my first ever solo review on this channel. Doing a full review of Bohemian Rhapsody starring Rami Malek. Surprisingly enough, it's been a pretty big hit in the US. Kind of shows how big an impact the music of Queen has had on people throughout the years. I didn't necessarily grow up a big Queen fan. You know, when I was a little kid, everybody knew We Will Rock You. I feel like they played that everywhere they played. We Are the Champions at every school event for everything. Like, these were like anthems and chants that everybody knew because they were like the go-to sports themes. And then I knew another one, Bites the Dust, because one of the old school WWF wrestlers, Junkyard Dog, that was his walkout music. Another one, Bites the Dust. Everybody knows that. Doom, 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 do 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 do, which is a really cool riff. But Queen didn't really come into my life until I watched Wayne's World, because there's a big comedic section in the film with Mike Myers where they're rolling in the Ford Pinto, or is it a Pacer? I don't remember what old car it was, but they're rolling down the street and they do this whole thing where everyone sings the a cappella part, and it's the first time I ever heard Bohemian Rhapsody, and I was like, wow, this song's great. It's amazing. It blew my mind, and it was like nothing I'd ever heard at that point. And by this time, this was already, you know, almost 20 years after the song originally dropped, and that's where I started kind of investigating Queen, and I found out the lead singer had been dead for, I think he had just passed away when Wayne's World came out. So, you know, when I was exposed to it, probably like 2 or 3 years after he died.
Mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me.
He died of AIDS. We knew that. Like at that time in the 90s, AIDS was a huge thing. AIDS was like new. Magic Johnson had just come out at testing positive for HIV. So that was like the first straight guy in the world that contracted the illness, and freaked everybody out, because now, like, up until that point, everybody thought that it was a disease that only gay people were affected by it, and it really brought into the mainstream that it basically turned it into this big fear of having sex in the 90s, when the 70s, the 60s, 70s were free love, the 80s were doing cocaine and having sex with random people, and then you get to the 90s and all of a sudden, like, you can't do that anymore because you could get AIDS, which we find out later it's not necessarily the case. But I said all this to say that I went in really excited to learn more about this band, because, to be honest with you, Queen's one of those bands that people don't talk about the way you talk about the Beatles, you talk about the Rolling Stones, you talk about Led Zeppelin. Like, everybody knows the backstory to all these bands. Even Kiss. Like, I'm a huge Kiss fan, so I knew like everything about Kiss. But Queen, not so much, because they were their own thing. They were different, and we knew these big, huge anthem songs they made, but we didn't really know everything else that went into it. So, the movie starts out. It's the beginning of the Live Aid. They're walking towards the stage for the Live Aid concert, and the Live Aid was the biggest thing ever in the 80s. Like, it was broadcast all over the world, a bunch of different satellites, and it was a benefit for the starvation in Africa. If you Google Queen, that'll be one of the first things that pops up. Well, now it'll be this movie, but that'll be one of the first things that pops up. You can watch the performance on YouTube if you want to. You'll always see, like, Freddie Mercury at Wembley Stadium wearing this white tank top with the studded armband, the studded belt. Like, it's a well-known scene, and I think that was a really great way of starting out the film. We go to that walk on stage, and all of a sudden we go into a flashback where he's working at the airport as a baggage handler, and, you know, someone makes a racial comment, calls him a packy, because he sees a suitcase that has a bunch of different stamps on it and, like, loses track, so they get behind a little bit. That's the first time his culture is brought up, and it's one of the last times. And that's one of the big gripes I have with the film, is that the film didn't know if it was going to be a biopic about Freddie Mercury or if it was a biopic about the band. And it turns out it's more of a biopic about Freddie Mercury, but they still try to incorporate the band as well. And I think that's where it falls flat. This film would have been a lot better as a miniseries, like an HBO, like a 6-episode series or even 3-episode series, where they had the time to really go through everything, because it just felt so rushed that you never had any real connection to what was going on screen. You got little hints of this and that, but you never really feel the impact of the events that are going on. Like, we see Freddie, he's walking out the door to go to another pub. His dad's like, "What are you doing with your life, son? I brought you up doing this stuff," and you're just like pissing it away. And he's like, "Well, look where you're at, Pop, with your mindset. You're not doing anything." And then that's the beginning of the conflict, but the conflict is never like fully like developed. Then he goes to this pub, he sees this band, their singer quits right after the show. He goes and talks to him. He's like, "Hey, I got some songs too." And they're like, they make a comment about his teeth, and then he sings, and they're like blown away, and then they become a band, and then within 10 minutes of the film, they're already signed to a record label. They're about to go on a world tour. They're making demands from their management for things that they want, and they're getting them. And it just rushes through. You don't really get the process of how they develop their sound. Really, the only connective tissue the film had throughout it was we follow Freddie. We follow his relationship with this woman, Mary Austin, who in the film he's engaged to. He has sexual relations with her, and they're living together the whole time. And he's constantly seeking her out. You know, there's a point in the film where he like tells her that, she's like, "Hey, you know what? You're acting weird. Something's different right now, and I just want you to come out and tell me." And he says, "Well, you know what? I think I'm bisexual." And she says, "No, Freddie, you're gay." And that kind of breaks them up, and they no longer live together. She goes on and does her own thing. But throughout the film, he's always calling her, always trying to find her, always trying to see where she's at, always inviting her places. And she kind of distances herself because she sees him going down this destructive path where he's kind of finding his own identity. And I think that was probably the main storyline of the film, of the rise and fall of this great musician and his finding his identity and who he is in this world, and never really accepting who he is until the very end. You know, he reconciles with his family when he finds out he's diagnosed with AIDS. He reconciles with the band. There's a short breakup that they had in the 80s, and they got back together for the Live Aid concert. So there's been some critiques about the film, about the portrayal of Freddie Mercury's sexuality, or how they didn't really go into it. Some people called it homophobic. I didn't really get that. And yeah, this is coming from a cisgendered, heteronormative male, whatever you want to call it, whatever label you want to slap on me. But I thought they did a great job with his sexuality, because if you look up any sort of information on him, he never completely came out and told the world that he was gay. You know, he was always kind of hiding behind it. It was his own personal thing. He didn't really he didn't embrace any LGBTQ movements or anything. He wasn't a part of that. He wasn't about that. And I think the film, like, it kind of shows, like, I think even to the end, he wasn't completely convinced that, you know, his love for Mary was so deep that I think maybe that was what confused him even till the end. Like, because he had so much in his heart for her, you know, that he would have done almost anything for her, that prevented him from just completely jumping on board the whole, you know, I don't know if it's a gay wagon. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but yeah, I think he was a complicated guy, and you know, even that aspect of his life, it was just complicated. You know, he didn't care. He just didn't care. I guess that's the best way of putting it. It wasn't a priority for him to go out there and fight for the rights of other people who are queer, you know, or lesbian, bisexual, gay. Like, he has no interactions with lesbians in the film at all. Like, he has your stereotypical like 80s leather gay boys around him, you know, throughout the film. But I don't know. I feel like that's people looking for something to complain about, when I think personally I did a pretty good job of addressing that in the film. Number one, the cultural thing, it really bothered me. Like, it's barely touched upon. We have a scene where he brings the band over, and he brings Mary over to meet his parents, and you know, they talk about how they're Indian Parsis, and Freddie was like, "Oh, I thought Freddie said he was born in London," and his sister's teasing, saying that he was born in London, when he was 18 years old. He basically completely denied his heritage. He tried to completely not be connected to India or Zanzibar. He was born in Zanzibar, which is in Tanzania. We don't really talk about that. And I think that's like really important, how this guy he was living a double life. Like, he wasn't completely sure if he was gay, or he was denying that he was gay. He's completely denying his heritage and his family, basically. He changes his name. He doesn't tell his dad that his name is Farouk Mansala. That's his birth name. Well, he changed it to Freddie Mercury. Now, legally, you know, on his death certificate, it says Freddie Mercury. They lightly talk about it in the film, but then they kind of just brush it off, and he keeps going with it. And I feel like that's pretty big stuff. That really lets us know, like, why are you ashamed of who you are? You know, why is your background? They make a comment about his teeth twice. And we know, if you do any sort of research, that his teeth, you know, that when he was in boarding school, they called him Bucky because his teeth have always been messed up, because he had, like, I guess he had 4 extra teeth that really pushed his top teeth out. He was a shy guy. He was an introvert when he wasn't on stage because of his teeth, but we never talk about this. It's never brought up. I mean, even the sexuality part of his life it's kind of brought up, but not really. It's kind of glossed over. Like, nothing we never delve into anything. And I think that's where this film fails. One of the coolest things about this movie, and one of my favorite parts, is there's not a guy pretending to be Freddie Mercury. All the vocals in this movie are isolated tracks from Freddie Mercury. They got the actual master tracks, because I know Brian May and Roger Taylor were producers on the film. They got the master tracks and used it for every single performance in the film. It's Freddie's actual voice. Because you're not going to find someone that can imitate that guy's voice. That's how unique. You know, he had an almost 4-octave range. You know, he'd go real low to real high. It's amazing what he was capable of doing. And that was super cool. That was one of my favorite parts. So if you're a fan of the music, you're going to be engaged the whole time. Even the end, like the film finishes with their Live Aid. They basically recreated the Live Aid performance, and they used the actual live performance music. Everything. You can watch the movie. You could sync them up and watch them together, and the sound will be exactly the same, because they're using the tracks from the concert, which is, I've never seen that before. That was new for me. To be honest with you, I found it a little odd that that's how they closed the film, is just basically just recreating the entire live performance. It was 20 minutes, 25 minutes long ending to the film. But it was I'm on the fence, because it was like cool and it wasn't at the same time. There's other parts too, like We Hear Under Pressure, which is a big song that a collaboration Queen did with David Bowie in the 80s. You don't see David Bowie. And for me, that's like that song is really important. And it makes me, I want to know about this relationship with David Bowie and with other musicians. Like, we really don't see Queen with interacting with anybody else. And I think, once again, it has to do with, because there was so much stuff they were trying to cram into this 2-hour and 15-minute window they had, that they just ran out of time. So you never really get the feel for anything. You know, they mention Elton John, they mention Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. Like, one of the main parts of the movie, there's a scene in the movie where they're pushing Bohemian Rhapsody as the single, and the guy at the head of the record label is like, no, so this song is too long, it's weird, you're saying nonsense, don't want to push this. I mean, it's in the trailer. Don't want to push this as a single, this is dumb. 3 minutes, give me the song that's 3 minutes. So they go behind, they threaten to walk first, and then they go behind his back and have another radio DJ accidentally play the single. And then they're performing it live. The single blows up, but it puts up all these clippings of, like, the press totally trashing this Bohemian Rhapsody song as like self-indulgent, like pseudo intellectual bullshit. You know, like it's trying to rip off Led Zeppelin. And the song becomes this huge hit, which is a really cool part. I'm gonna just say it one more time. If you're a fan of Queen, go and watch this film, because you'll enjoy some parts of it. But as a film itself, I'm not a fan of biopics, and this is not making them any better for me. Bohemian Rhapsody didn't make me really want to go out and do more research on Queen. It just is what it is. And Rami Malek, you know, it was a great performance. The guys that were the members of Queen, they looked almost identical to him. Like, they were cast great. The casting was great in this film. You know, I have no problem with that. It's just the story was it was just generic. It was just generic, and it just kind of threw stuff on screen, and, you know, you're going along for a ride, but at a certain point, you're just kind of like, waiting for it to end. So I'll probably give it like a 5 out of 10. You know, right? It's just a mediocre film, and the only saving grace is the music. Thanks for watching. Make sure to smash that like button, leave comments, let us know what you think, and we will see you next time.